That's Marsha. You know her. Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the Be More News Morning Show. My name's Donnie Glover, publisher of BmoreNews.com. We just launched BlackUSA.News, and guess who is the editor? The one and only, the incomparable, all the way from South Bend, Indiana. I didn't even know that Black people lived there. Marsha Jews. Good morning.
Good morning, Donnie. So y'all, just it's early. He hasn't had all of his coffee yet. But thank you, Donnie, for the wonderful introduction. And we'll talk more about that little surprise that he mentioned today. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference, BEA. And BEA is easily the most anticipated diversity event of the year. BEA STEM Conference is a talent-rich environment for recruitment, networking, and professional development. In attendance are college representatives and thousands of elite professionals and students from across the country who represent the upper echelon of the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM disciplines and careers. The fields of expertise represented at this conference are as diverse as the men and women who attended. This year, we're very excited about the HBCU Village, the K through 12 Village, the Interview Village, and the HBC Reunion. All you have to do is go up to BEA, as you can see above my head. I don't know where my hand is, if you can see it, .org, BEA.org, and you can register at no charge. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you February the 11th through the 13th online at BEA.org.
That's very good, Marsha. So today, Marsha, we have joining us Angela Sims. How are you, Angela?
I'm doing well.
Good. Now, Marsha, Angie's a local icon. You just don't know her.
Well, she just said that I met her before.
Oh, yeah, let's hear that story. What happened? How'd you meet her, Angie?
So I met her at the museum, and I was there helping someone with their wedding, and the person had an attitude, and
the bride had an attitude.
The bride had an attitude, and you looked at me and said, "Get your people, not today." And ever since then, I was like, "Oh, I love this woman. I love her energy," because she was doing great, but the person did have an attitude, so I understand fully.
And I'm so glad you got to have that experience and that she understood, because we aren't going to do that today.
But Angie, I got pictures of you at one of our events down there. You had a Black Wall Street Award down there.
I was, yes.
I love it. And she's so beautiful. So tell us about you and what do you do, Angela?
Sure. Currently, I'm Chief Financial Officer for a chain of urgent care centers based out of Delaware and Maryland. I'm from Baltimore. Born and raised in Baltimore. I graduated from Western High School, from UMBC, and from University of Baltimore. I moved back to Baltimore about 6 years, I guess now. I had moved away and lived in PG County and Howard County for a while. But I'm back. I'm ready to do stuff. I'm ready to make an impact in Baltimore because that's where I came from. And I know it's a lot of potential in Baltimore.
There really is. And I think what's really critical here is to see your movement. I'm loving this. I just interviewed a young person earlier today about being a student of UMBC. And was Freeman the president when you were there?
He was, yes.
But, I think that it's really important to look at, I'm not that math girl. So I'm just really proud of anybody who can be in the financial industry, right?
Yes.
How did you begin to start focusing on the fact that you wanted to be in that genre?
Sure. So I actually started off as a chemistry major.
Wow.
I knew I wanted to be in healthcare, but chemistry was my thing. Math and science was always my thing. So I started while I was at UMBC. I started working at St. Agnes Hospital in the lab. And I said, the lab is not my place. Like, it's fun. The people there are fun, but I need to interact with people. So I changed my major to health policy and had a minor in economics. And then when I graduated from there, I went to UB for MBA, concentration in finance. So I worked in the healthcare space, but doing more of like contractual work. And then I started doing finance projects immediately. And then that just led down the path to doing more and more finance, where I felt it still had that connection to my passion for science and math.
And look at this, Bea, the Black engineer, and it's all about STEM, science,
Yes.
technology, engineering, and math, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so this is really exciting because this is a perfect example of how you literally were in both industries, right? Or both, what would they be called? Both professions.
Right.
And switched. So that's a huge from science to math. Was that a huge change for you? You
It's
got a great
not.
mind, girl. You have a brilliant mind to be able to make that kind of a
I
change, right?
think it just because I admire people that have that creative side. I was telling my husband the other night, like, growing up, I wasn't big into reading, and I realized it was because you didn't have the choice to pick what you read. It was more like forced upon you, depending on the education system. Whereas now I have the choice of what I want to read. So, and a lot of the people have made that connection between science and using that in the outward, like meaning there's a lot of analytics that go into science and math. And we need that. We need analytics to understand the patterns of things. And I enjoy reading that type of stuff. So it's almost like it wasn't a hard connection when a connection was drawn to it, like the healthcare, the sciences, and the need for finance to make it all work.
Mm-hmm. But even so, the making that move, there had to be something that clicked in your head from a laboratory, right? To to a spreadsheet, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
that's really extreme because
Yes,
there's an interaction with whatever those products were in a lab and the interaction with the numbers and pulling them together to blend to create
right.
something. Can you just kind of talk about that? Because that's a
So
very interesting movement.
I think that for me, it wasn't necessarily the numbers. You know how it's something that you love to do, and I think for me, fixing is what I love to do. So
Okay.
think about it from somebody working in a lab, like you're drawing connections. So I worked in a lab where there was a lot of specimens coming in. It could come to the pathology department, which means it was human organs to blood specimens. And to me, there you're solving a problem. You're trying to identify what's wrong with someone. When it comes to math and science, for me, when I do finance, I draw more to the analytics side of it. So yes, there's a spreadsheet of numbers, but I'm trying to tell a story and fix something. So say for instance, in my daily work, if I notice that, spending in our medical supplies has grown dramatically, if I don't see our volumes have grown dramatically either, now I need to fix a problem. Either there's an inventory problem, a supplier is not giving us what we need. We need to focus on, something else. So I think for me, my passion is fixing things. So when it came to that lab and the connection of we're trying to identify an issue with someone so that we can help them versus now, even when I do finances, it's not just let me give you a report, have a good day. It's what's the story that this report is telling us and how to help us with our outward operations.
Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna go back to something that really your brain flipped from the science to the math,
Yes.
right? Your
Yes.
brain went from the left to it's still all of one side of the brain, right? But somewhere in there, it had to get to a different part of that brain. On that, is it the left side for math and science and the right side for art?
I don't,
It's
it is one or the other, right?
one
Yes.
or the other. But but you knew that I can't deal with the science part, right? There had to be something that occurred, something that happened in your head to say, I don't want to do the science part anymore. I really think I like these numbers. So,
I can't even tell you what did it. I think more for me, it probably was the lack of interaction with people. Like meaning in a lab, you are confined to your team.
mhm.
versus in my world with the finance, especially I work still in healthcare, but in finance. But now I'm dealing with the operations team. I'm dealing with the other finance team. I'm dealing with marketing. So it's like a connection to all of that together versus just one component. So I think really for me, I mean, if someone, my son, he loves math and science. If he brings his science projects, and this is the 5-year-old, I'm ready to do it. I'm like, come on, I remember.
Right.
I still like doing it, but I think the bigger connection to bringing all the pieces together, like even when I worked in the lab, I was the type of person to be like, oh, is there a way I can see an operation, or can I see an autopsy, or can I see, because I think I need to see all the pieces together and not just one component.
That's interesting. So you're a big picture kind of person that
Definitely.
allows you to then zero in, but you need to
Yes.
see. I'm like that too, but I'm not a I'm not. I'm not that girl, right? But I think that's really critical. And so now, what would you tell young people as they're trying to figure out? They're at home.
Right.
What are they doing at home, and how can what they're doing at home help them think about what happens when they get back in a classroom and what their future looks like?
So I would say identify what you like and not what you're being forced to like. Meaning social media, especially for younger people, has a big influence. So don't be influenced because you feel like you have to follow the crowd. Like really, what does your heart draw to? If you could be in a room just by yourself, what would you draw to? And once you get back in that environment where you're face to face with your teachers or other individuals, tell them, let them know, I really enjoyed, even if it's a television show, because a television show can oftentimes tell you a lot about what it is that you draw to. I really had this particular interest in this. Are there programs out there? Like I said, I came out of Baltimore City public schools, and when I was in school, one of the first program that I really enjoyed through Baltimore City public schools was a group called Law Links, where it connected high school students with law firms throughout the city, and because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but
Okay.
it gave you that exposure early. So if you see a television show that you have interest to, or if you started playing with certain things, you let your teacher know, hey, I have this interest. Are there programs that gear towards this? Because the earlier you get exposure, you'll really see if that's what you like, or if you want to transition and get exposure into other things.
Mhm. When you were making a decision, because it sounds like you are a planner, that as a little girl, you were already dreaming and thinking about what you wanted to do and who you wanted to become, right? And so, what would you tell children about thinking about who they are and how do they identify those elements of themselves that can put them on a trajectory to a career?
I would say everybody has a role in everything, and every role is important, no matter how big or how small it is. People like sometimes, depending on where you work, it's like, oh, well, this person is only a secretary. I tell people all the time, the secretary is probably one of the most important people in an office because they get the schedules together. They will determine whether or not you get a meeting with a certain person. So it's not based on a title, it's based on what you're passionate about, and everybody's role plays a significant role. So don't feel minimized on what it is that you want to do, because some of the smallest things that people have passions about turn into some of the grandest things. So
Mm.
whatever it is that you want to do, just stick to it. Stick to it. Don't let anybody sway you one way. Identify other people that can help you move those things forward or teach you more about it. Go to the library. When Ena Pratt Library opens back up, they have wonderful staff there that will, guide you and direct you and show you resources and material to take you down further. Even social media. I mean, young people spend a lot of time on social media. You can find people that have that same interest that you have and start following them. Make those, the people that you actually follow.
Mhm. What made you decide on UMBC?
I think I had such a connection to Baltimore. I didn't want to move. Like my dad was like, "Oh, you should go to Detroit. You should go here. You should go there." I'm like, I'm not going far from Baltimore. I'm a very family oriented person. I'm one of those people that if a job was like, oh, you need to move, I'll be like, okay, well, you have to find a home for my parents as well, because I a family person. Like, I need to be able to touch and talk to my family often. So UMBC, I visited Johns Hopkins and UMBC were the two choices that I really, felt like I had interest in. And the reason Johns Hopkins is because I was a part of their, I can't remember the name of the program, but it was like a Saturday program for people that were in math and science. And I was a part of that program, growing up through middle school. But when I visited Johns Hopkins, the culture wasn't me. It just wasn't, the culture wasn't me.
What do you mean?
It was not me. It just wasn't me, Donnie. You know what? It just wasn't me. So, however, when I visited,
he's not finished with you yet, Angela.
I know I'm not going to go there with Donnie.
Like collard greens with no ham hocks?
It was, so I saw
spaghetti without sugar.
Here's a good example. I saw a T-shirt the other day that says, "I'm classy, but I curse a little." That's me. So they were a little bit too classy for me. They didn't curse once in a while. So I needed.
Are you saying you have a tad of urban in you?
I have some sprinkles. I have lots of sprinkles. Like, it's like a cake, and that's topping on top is all Baltimore sprinkled through me. So UMBC, I felt like, had a strong academic sense. And Dr. Rabowski was very, good at pushing people, getting people engaged. So I felt that was my place. I felt like, this is me. This is, that connection to Baltimore still. However, the environment, the students, I felt like I had more of a connection to.
Angie, I was over at the Starbucks over there on St. Paul Street, and I got into a conversation with a young Caucasian lady, and it was about crime. And she said out of her mouth, this Johns Hopkins student blew my mind. She said,
"What's her name? Karen?"
Karan. And she said that Black people commit all of the crimes in America.
Wow.
A Johns Hopkins student.
Wow.
I was blown away.
Why?
Johns Hopkins students are supposed to be among the smartest in the United States.
One thing don't have nothing to do with the other, because she was raised that way.
So, Angie, you mentioned the secretary. One thought that came to mind, people often overlook the janitor.
Yes.
The janitor knows where everybody is. They have the keys to every door.
Keys to everything. Yes. Yes.
Don't forget the janitor. Okay.
Don't forget the janitor. Yes.
Marsha, we were talking about the big picture. And so while we're on Baltimore City Public Schools, where are the schools today? Are our schools still as attractive today as they were when we were growing up? You went to Western, I was next door probably for a couple of years, then to Dunbar. How's the state of Baltimore City public education?
He's talking to you, Angela, because I didn't go to school here. I went to John Adams High School in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay. So what's a nice way to say this? It is no nice way to say this. I definitely feel like there is a disconnect. I mean, the numbers alone, like, I was reading something, and especially in a pandemic right now, it's probably even worse, and we can't see it. There are, it's always one of those things, like we can, Monday quarterback to say how it happened, but it's so many things combined. Like, it's not just the education, it's the environment, it's the parenting, it's a combination of all of those things, but you have to adjust with the times. So meaning we can't just make excuses and say, oh yeah, the schools are not, you don't see the same product of people coming out of the schools because the same type of people don't live in the city, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like a business. I've worked in, corporate all my life. We can't just say, oh, well, guess what? People aren't coming here, so now we're just going to let our business go out of business. We have to adjust according to what is happening. So if we see that, and you can't fault just, we can't just point the finger at the teachers and say, well, the teachers aren't doing their job, because the teachers have a lot to deal with now. The question is, are the politicians allowing the path? Meaning, is the funding in the right? Are the policies within the school? Do we have the right people overseeing certain things? When I went to Baltimore City Public Schools and you went to Baltimore City Schools, how the budgets were handled are different. Each school manages their own budgets now. This is just an example of what I mean. Each school handles their own budgets. What Marsha was just talking about, she's not a math and science person. So imagine if she was an educator and somebody comes in and says, okay, in addition to educating these kids who now deal with a different element of they're watching crime, they're seeing a crime happen before them every day. So now you're dealing with psychological things with the kids. And guess what? Now you have to manage your budget as well. It's like, when do things stop? When do people step back? Everybody step back. Whether or not, is the policies put in place at, on the state level, on the city level, at the school board level. When do you allow, everybody to come to the table and strategically say, this city has changed, the dynamics has changed, the income levels have changed, and the need, even the curriculum in Baltimore. Some of the things that we were learning are not the same things that should be learned now, like the need for certain things. I mean, when I think about Donnie, our parents, they could come from out of high school and go work at GM or, Bethlehem Steel. And that was end all be all. They were great middle income families. We did well with those type jobs. Now it's kind of like, well, what are the jobs that are in Baltimore? Because what's the likelihood of these people moving out of the cities? Are we changing the curriculum to match the actual needs of what's in the city? So it's like, it's piled up things that, yes. So to answer your original question, it's not the same as we have been there. Like, I think that, when we were there, it was set up to work for us at that given time and the needs there. However, the curriculum, the policies, etc., have not evolved to match what is happening in the city and what the needs of the city are.
Well, let me ask you, as an African American here in Baltimore, a majority Black city where we dominate the political scene, do you think that we as a community should be in a better place? Do you think our Black leaders have effectively served us?
So the problem is, I won't even say, it is it's tricky in the sense of we have an expectation that just because somebody looks like us is going to work for us. The question is, are the people that we put in place have the capacity to handle what the needs are of the city? So a Black face doesn't just fix a problem. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a combination of things. Or if you had the belief in somebody, I think the disconnect is, when we had white politicians in place, we are not as trusting. So we're going to ask more questions. We're going to, as people, we're going to engage with the system. We're not just going to say, oh, okay, go on, you got it. Whereas, if a Black person is in place, we're more trusting. We feel like it's like we let Uncle Bob, handle it for us. So Uncle Bob has it. Well, everybody's not Uncle Bob. Everybody doesn't have your best interest in mind. So just like we would question a white politician, we need to question our own politicians too. Hold everybody accountable. And sometimes our comfort with people. So meaning it's like, it's one of those things in the workplace too. When you get too familiar, you get too comfortable and you don't hold people at the same level of accountability. So it's one of those things, like, definitely, we had the expectation that because it was Black politicians, something different was just going to magically happen. Whereas I feel like the Black community overall was a lot more engaged in the system when we felt like we didn't have someone in the system representing us. And we need to get back to that. We need to hold people accountable on those same levels. And because I don't want to just say, like, blanketly, oh, Black people haven't, because there's a couple of, Black people with the skills, because it's one of those things, Baltimore City has so many problems piled on top of each other. It's almost like you have to interview the right candidate and not just the right face or the right name, meaning, oh, well, this person has been in politics so long. It's not just about politics. Like, who has the business sense and a relation relationships to be able to dig us out of this mess? Who has the leadership? I'll use different pieces of politicians that I really like. Sheila, for example. I didn't live in Baltimore when she was actually the mayor. However, I did live in Baltimore, I believe, when she was city council president. And then even engaging with people that worked at, City Hall or throughout the city. I never heard people talk about enjoying the leadership of someone. And that's a first step. So a quality that we need in all of our politicians are leadership abilities, people that motivate other people to do their job well and set the path in place for them to be able to do certain things. You need someone else that has business aspects. You need people that understand the business aspects. You need people that know how to communicate with people. So I think it's a combination of things. So I won't just blame it on, the politicians that we've had in the city, because it was piles of things that have come on, prior to just the Black politicians that we've had. Things have piled on year after year after year. And we've assumed some of those same policies and haven't evaluated and changed them. So now the problem masks even further. And it's not I don't think it's a Black or white politician thing. It's we, as the people and residents of Baltimore City, need to start holding our politicians, more accountable and engaging with them more.
So what do you think about children who are being homeschooled?
I think it's challenging for parents. This morning there was an article, I think the Baltimore Sun had this. It was an offshoot of something else I was reading, where Dr. Santalese wants to bring back, kindergartners through second graders. So when you talk about homeschooling, our kids actually go to private school. So they have the option to be in school and online. Our kids are 3-year-olds, 3 and 5 years old. As a parent working, it's difficult to homeschool a child. Like, I don't care where you work. It's difficult to homeschool a child and do your work as well. That is why, they actually go to, physical locations during the day. Now, if we were, stay-at-home parents, it's a different story. Like, that is how your life was set up. But if your life is set up that you have a 2-income household or even a 1-income household that somebody has to work, it's challenging to homeschool your kids. Now, if you have the flexibility and option to work from home, it makes it a little bit easier. However, when you talk about and you just look at the dynamics of Baltimore, in certain populations, you have hourly workers, which means they're not at the capacity or capability to be able to stay home. They have to physically go into a workplace. So somebody can't necessarily be home with the kids. Either means the kids have to be home by themselves, homeschooling themselves, or they rely on, teachers or teachers' assistants online to help them. Anything can happen with the computer. I work, in an office environment, and I have to call IT sometimes to say something's happening with my computer. So imagine a elementary school person having troubles and home by themselves. It's a challenge. So I think homeschooling in general is a challenge. And then even, as adults, there are some people that can work home, and there are some people that it's a distraction for them to work at home. They need to go into the workplace because it's a distraction for them to work at home. I'm sure it's the same for kids. They see a toy in the corner. It's kind of like, wait a minute, I'm off screen and now I'm doing something else. So I definitely think it's challenging. I think that, my hopes are with Biden, some of the things that he just signed in place to give structure to the nation of how to open schools back up, how to get us back in place so that our kids won't be behind. I feel like at this point, particularly Baltimore City public schools, at this rate, our kids are going to be 2 years behind by the time they get back into school, which is a problem, a long-term problem, not just a problem right now, but a problem when it comes to them becoming adults and have to compete with other people going into the workforce.
So would you agree that all students in the public school system have lost a year?
Oh, definitely.
And so would that be a priority? Say that you were hypothetically the mayor that just came in. Would that be any part of your initial decisions?
It probably would be a task force that I was really focused on, because when you talk about the inequities of the city, and if we're trying to get people gathered back together, education is one of the biggest things when you talk about disparities. So if we know as a city we were already behind because
Right.
of that, we definitely have to, get on it. Like, we have to get on it and jump through to try to make sure not only are we not set behind. I mean, that's what the Kerwin Commission was about. There was already
Mm-hmm.
back and a disconnect. So if we know, because there's the question of where's the funding from that going to come. So to me, yes, I would. One of the main task force I would have would be on education and how can we creatively, close that gap, whether it be not only in school, but once we get back in school, can some of these nonprofits do after school programs that we get funding for to continue that education to try to lead them forward, because we know there's a setback.
Where are the nonprofits, and which particular nonprofits are you talking about? I mean, I know Maryland has.
About any of them, because when I say even the changing the education, we don't teach entrepreneurship, we don't teach skills training. So any organization, whether or not it's a civic works that does hands-on things, or a art institute that has a nonprofit, teaching people some hands-on trade, some skill after school will kind of at least give them some tangible knowledge, because it's not even just the training itself. It's the understanding of working as a team. It's the understanding of those skills that when people come to interview at businesses that we look for. Can you communicate? Can you communicate? Like, just bottom line, can you communicate with people? Do you understand my instructions? So even if you say, I don't want to go into electrician, to be an electrician, but the fact that you were able to follow directions from whoever was teaching you how to become an electrician is a skill in itself that's transferable over when it comes to competing in the workforce.
I have a question. I heard you say earlier, and we've got some real issues in the public school system that are unbelievable. But tell us a couple of things that are happening. You don't need to name the school, but how your children are navigating being in a private school, and what are the private schools providing
Sure.
your children?
Sure. So for us, it started off because they started there younger. Like, the school can start at 1 year old, so they've been there forever. Our son was actually, in the plans of trying to get into a Baltimore City public school because he could start kindergarten this year. However, once the pandemic hit, I pulled the brakes on that because I said I can't I can't teach my kid at home. I'm sorry, it's not in my skill level. People will say, well, you're a CFO. Everybody has a skill. And this leads back to me saying everybody's role and job is important. I am a CFO. I can do numbers all day long, but my skill is not teaching young people. So a teacher's role is just as important as my role. It depends on where you are, in that environment. So what they do, as far as, making sure everything maintains, safety and that protocol at school. They have limited. So like I said, there's two options. There's the option for kids to go in person as well as kids to go online. I do believe there was, tuition adjustment for the parents that chose to stay home, because you're not using the same level of resources of the teachers. So they do some adjustment to the tuition. As far as making sure the kids are okay in coming in schools, they have paths within the hallway. So meaning everybody, it's not a free for all. There's an enter on one side of the building. There's an exit on one side of the building. No parents can come inside of the building. Like, there's zones that, you can actually drop your kids off. There's a screening protocol every morning. So every morning we get a text message that we have to answer questions about our children. We have to take their temperature. When we actually drop them off, we have, the temperature is taken again. And then randomly through the day, the teachers might take the temperature, different temperatures of the kids. As far as the classrooms, like I said, they limited the capacity of people that can actually be in each classroom so that the kids are spread apart. Like, they have their sections when they eat. they sit like every other person in diagonal so that nobody is right beside each other or right across from each other. So I definitely feel like, it requires some level of social distancing. And I don't think right now with the numbers, you can just open up a school and say, hey, everybody, come on in, that type of thing. You definitely have to make sure that even the teachers can clean, like, in between, can you wipe off the areas for eating, that type of thing. They do stay in their classrooms to eat because, you don't want to be moving and transferring around places. So they've done a wonderful job. We haven't had any, instances, knock on wood, of any body coming back positive. They even, some of the questions they even ask is if you've been a part of a gathering, that you have to stay home with your kid for a couple of days. If somebody in the household has traveled out of the area, your kid has to stay home because you've been in, contact. Now, the thing with that is almost like an honesty system. Like, are people going to be honest? Like, and I think when you're talking about private schools, some of the parents and the values at that particular school is they wouldn't want their kids exposed, and therefore they're not going to expose other kids. I don't know if that's the same level that you're going to have in a environment where people have other competing obligations. Like, I'm assuming that a lot of the parents that go to the private school, they probably have the option to work from home. They have the flexibility to, take off. Whereas a lot of parents that are hourly, that might just be like, my kid has to go. Like, I have to go to work. I have no other choice. Might not be that, as honest. Like, I have some friends that are administrators down in the Atlanta area, close to Atlanta in Georgia, and those schools are open. And they said, you do have some cases where the parents know when they come in that their kid was sick that morning, but they still send that kid to school. And it's not until they actually get in the building and the nurse checks them and is like, your kid had a fever. Like, why did you actually send them to school? So I definitely think, it's a combination of the honesty and integrity of the parent as well.
Mm-hmm. Do they have internet connectivity in the schools that your children go to?
They do, yes.
And so if they were to stay home or something, there is a continuum with their online capability.
They can continue online. They have, packages they can download, even if, they're not on. They have packages that the teachers actually upload. The teachers are really good about sending things home. So if there are times that the school is on a break, or, they send home packages. Like over the MLK weekend, my son had to read a Rosa Parks book and come back and tell about it. So it's kind of like the teachers try to adapt to the needs of the kids. So it's not necessarily a check the list, everybody's doing this type of form. If they feel like my kid needs to work more on math, the package they may send or the things they may upload for me or tell me to focus on is more around what the need of my kid is.
Mm-hmm.
How do we attract businesses back to Baltimore?
Oh, it's one of those things that it's a lot of stuff. I mean, when we hear some of the things of why businesses aren't coming, businesses want to be an environment that their employees feel safe and they feel safe running a business as well. So I think two big things in Baltimore City: the crime rate and their schools. Like when you're talking about businesses, a lot of people that work at companies have school age kids, or because once you're ready to retire, you're towards the end of the career. But the majority of your career, like you're in that phase where you have school age kids. So if you want a business to be somewhere and you want your employees to live in a reasonable distance of the business and not have to commute, you have to have good schools because they want to feel comfortable that they can send their kids to those schools, and they have to feel safe. Those are, I think, the two biggest things. I mean, we can people tax breaks, we can give all of that stuff, but I think if businesses don't feel safe and their employees don't feel comfortable or want to be there, they're not going to.
Mm-hmm. So, we sit down and we look at the crime rate or the death rate of 300 plus people in this city. And how does that impact a business? That's huge. When we look at those kinds of numbers, that's awfully high. What do we do in terms of looking at the people who are actually doing these crimes, right? The criminals that are doing it, and what is going on or what has gone on in their life for them to get to the place where they're so angry, they're so traumatized that the only way that they can resolve a problem is by murder.
Right.
And that has always just broken my heart, and because I don't know that answer. And I don't know that anybody has, we put people in jail, but what are we doing with them in jail other than locking them in a box?
Yes.
And who are they when they come out after being locked in that box? And we have this expectation that they can contribute to society after they've already been through some kind of trauma to get them there in the first place.
Right. Right.
And now we've added on top of that more trauma. How do we move forward with that?
Right. Baltimore, I feel like, is in a unique place in the sense of we have what we have going on, but the two economic things.
Okay, so she's having a connection issue, but I think to the audience, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can't. Everything's good now. Go ahead.
Okay. I think in Baltimore, we have this crime issue, but the two biggest institutions that drive the economic forces in Baltimore is healthcare and education. We joked earlier about, Johns Hopkins, but Johns Hopkins is a great research institution. And it's like, use people for what they are good for. So meaning mental health is a huge issue. And we have a large healthcare capacity and institutions in Baltimore. And getting to the bottom of understanding where these people, why are they doing what they're doing? Education focuses a lot around research. So why don't we do something that utilizes the healthcare sector from a mental health capacity? How can we build the capacity to provide more mental health programs? And how can we use these education institutions? We have Hopkins, we have Morgan, we have Coppin, we have tons of educational institutions, utilize that research component to sit down and understand the people, even understand the policies that drive some of the things, that have led to the systemic things that we've actually seen. Because if you don't understand what's doing it and those policies are still in place, the same things are actually going to because there's an incentive for somebody to do something. For example, it should be an incentive for somebody to actually, want to do something. I'll give an example of something I was listening to the other day. They were talking about ban the box. And, you can
explain what that means for those who do not know.
So ban the box is, an employer and under employers, when you apply for a job, it asks the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Years ago, a lot of states, it started, I believe, under the Obama administration. It started before him, but he initiated from a federal level to, discontinue doing this because they felt it disproportionately impacted people that do have skills, but were, incarcerated to not even be interviewed at all. But by banning the box, you end up just eliminating, you eliminate that bias. However, you can't undo racism. So what has consequently happened is that by institutions banning the box, it has actually hurt young Black men and some Hispanic men, because people interviewing just now assume you can't check off a box, but you're probably a. So it's kind of like, until we get to the bottom of things, we create policy to try to help. And that's why we did lock them up. Everybody got locked up. And now we see all these people being released from prison now, and particularly in Baltimore City. Like, it's almost one of those things that if you map out the crimes that happen, a lot of these people have been released from prison. These people that are getting killed have been released from prison recently. And it's like, why is that happening? Are you all really incentivizing them or helping them? If they can't get a job because people are discriminating against them, if they don't have the wherewithal or the income, like, you putting them back in the same environment, like, what exactly are we doing? So we can create these policies, but like I said, unless we really know the root cause, and you can't undo people's racist behaviors. So if
Right.
people still, you try to say, well, ban the box, but if people still aren't interviewing it, and now you're disproportionately affecting other Black people, and not even the ones that were, convicted of felons, then you've made the problem bigger than what it was. And then it makes me wonder, post this pandemic, how is that going to further increase? When we look at people that are being unemployed, we haven't really seen the numbers in detail, but who is it that's being unemployed? And particularly in Baltimore City, are these people going to be employable, or are employers going to, discriminate when it to rehire and that type thing? So back to originally, I think, yes, we are in a unique place where we do have high crimes. But I feel that between the education institutions that we have around and the healthcare institutions that we have around, somebody can come up with some type of unique task force and say, guess what? From our perspective, how can we research and help come up and understand and give the history, as well as give the understanding of why these people are doing, and how we can really put something in place to turn this around.
Well,
And part of the problem is that you have to have the thought that people have the desire or have the motivation to even find out or care. And it
Yes.
goes back to racism. And when we start looking at redlining and all of that and the impact, if you looked at the red lines that are in this city and where the highest areas of crime and the highest unemployment rates and the highest dropout rates, what is going on in those communities, and they need to be analyzed and dealt with, and a strategic plan needs to be put in place in order to bring it out of that destitution.
let me just share this, Angie. There's a certain level of distrust when it comes to the medical industry for Black people. I mean,
Definitely.
my grandfather said back in 1950, don't go over near the area of Johns Hopkins. There's also been writing a book. There's a book, Medical Apartheid.
Right.
I think also of the sterilizations that took place in North Carolina. I think of Henrietta Lacks. I think of the Tuskegee experiment. There's a certain distrust that Black people have. We can see it now with COVID.
Yes.
Right.
Should Black people, there are two schools of thought. One, that they're pushing the vaccine on Black people, the most vulnerable, according to the stats. So should Black people get the vaccine, or should Black people fall back and let others go first?
Right. I think when it comes, I definitely agree. There's a disconnect in the healthcare community and a distrust. I think though, over the years, we have more Black physicians that have come into realm. So when we talk about, Tuskegee, some of Henrietta Lacks, you didn't have Black physicians. I think now we had Black physicians, but the number of Black physicians that we have, I think that if we promote and encourage more people to, go to medical school, or make that an incentive, that, we're going to find so many people in Baltimore City that we're going to send to medical school. You can change that. I mean, it's just like somehow we believed in Black politicians. You understand what I mean? Like we believe that when we elected a Black politician, that they have our best interests in mind. So I think, if you find Black physicians and train them the right way, bring them from those communities, that you'll get that level. You'll start to get the level of trust. And I don't, fault people for having that distrust. If I had engagement with someone, I would have that distrust too. For me, I think that the difference is I've worked in healthcare 20 some plus years. Now, I know the questions to ask. I know the things to look for. So that's what gives me the comfort and gives me, certain things. But I will say, once again, we get back to when you talk about racism, and sometimes it's not right now, it's not that we're testing on people. It's we don't know how to communicate with people and their differences. Like me, I'll use myself as an example. When I was pregnant with my second child, I had pneumonia, and I told them, I said, something is wrong, and I went to an area hospital, and they immediately injected an IV and was like, you're fine, because I looked fine. Black people don't age at the same level as other people. Like I'm 40 plus years old, and people would think that I'm not 40 plus. If I go into a doctor's office and I look like I look right now and say I don't feel well, they say to me, but you look fine, but I don't feel well. So, when it came to that incident with pneumonia, I looked at Brian and I said, get me out of here. They're going to kill me. So then I, called and went back to my regular place, and the doctor that was there, the emergency doctor that was there, she was a Black woman, and she said to me, I can tell you feel terrible. I can tell in your voice, I can tell in your face that you feel terrible, and I'm not going to let you go until we figure out what's wrong with you. So they did what they had to do, and it came back that I had pneumonia. But if I stayed at this other place, it's a possibility that I might not have made it out of there. It might have been worse. So I don't think necessarily that they were testing on me. I think they don't understand us. I don't think they understand
or care.
There's
some racism going on in the medical field, period.
Two things came to mind as you were talking. One is Dr. What's the brain surgeon?
Ben
Carson. He comes to mind. You were talking about how we need more Black doctors in the realm. He was certainly in the realm right there next door to the president. Who also came to mind, and I don't know if you can see it, is Dr. Charles Drew.
Yeah.
He was an American surgeon, medical researcher, blood transfusion.
Right.
And he died because he could not get one.
Right. Racism.
Yeah.
I think of Henrietta Lacks, they made millions, if not billions, off of her HeLa cells. But the family, and I have his book. The grandson wrote a book, Henrietta Lacks, The Untold Story, because they put out a story. The first book was the book that went on Oprah and became famous, and it was full of lies.
Right. That was the white girl.
Right.
Yeah. So, what's stopping you from running for mayor? I think you're quite.
You live in the zip code.
I think you're quite mayoral. I think you would be truly an addition to what we've seen in the past. You can count. You understand science. Okay. And I'm not putting you on.
If you say she can count.
And you don't have to answer this question, but City Council President Nick Mosby suggested hiring 7 people to count, Marsha, 7 people to count to the tune of $700,000 where all of the money is going. Now, you're a CFO. Would you have taken...
Wait a minute. Say that one more time, because I don't think my brain absorbed what you just said.
Nick wants 7 people hired to the tune of $700,000 to look for missing money. Look for holes in the Swiss cheese of Baltimore City budgets.
So they all get $100,000 each?
No, it's probably benefits and everything else included in that 700.
Oh, but it's still the same thing. It's 7 people for 700,000. That's $100,000 a piece to go do what? Can you call a CPA company and just have them do an audit for less than $500,000?
All right. So to be fair, because I don't know, I need to know the details. I'm gonna send an email or something to figure out what the details are behind this. But I can tell you that what I feel about Baltimore City is too big, yet too small. So meaning, I don't feel like I can tell you, I've worked in a range of companies. I work for a company that's, a healthcare company that's spread out throughout the entire country, smaller ones that's located just in, the city of Baltimore, state of Maryland, etc. The larger you have gotten, the harder it is to uncover problems. Baltimore City has too many layers, entirely too many layers.
What does that mean? Layers of what?
Layers of people, layers of departments that don't communicate with each other, that doesn't know, right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, but they're
How do you know that though?
From interacting with them. I'm gonna give you all a prime example of right now. We purchased a home through a vacant home in Baltimore City. And it took us almost 9 months to go to settlement on this because of, it was like one of those
Vacants to value.
vacant, yeah, it was a receivership type property. Finally, we went to closing now during the middle of the pandemic, and they were supposed to abate some things that, the title company even showed me the letter that they sent to Baltimore City that they were supposed to abate, past charges. There is still a $8,000 water bill sitting on that property from the person that was on there before. And when I say too many layers, meaning there's a person that it's apartment that records the deeds and this apartment that records the abatement, but they don't communicate with each other. And so you shouldn't even be able to record somebody's deed if they still have outstanding, debt on something. That's how most counties operate. You can't record a deed until they've cleared out the outstanding. So now for us, we haven't started doing any work on the property because it's kind of like if we have to go through a legal battle with it, we're not going to dump all our money into fixing this problem and then have to still clear up, $8,000 or more on the back end. So how many other people have that same issue? But why is it that those departments aren't consolidated some kind of way? Like if you're abating something and you're you should be able to go and look into a system to say, I'm not even recording this deed because you know what I mean? Like, so you have
So the other owner of the property should be, why aren't they billed or sued or something for and how did it get to $8,000 on a water bill?
Exactly. So you have all these small departments. I'm just going to do a piece. I'm going to do a piece. I'm going to do a piece. Everybody's doing a piece, but nobody knows the whole picture. And nobody, everybody's waiting for the other person to do something. In the meantime, nothing is done. So how many salaries we've paid 3 or 4 different departments salaries to do something that hasn't actually been done yet. And that's what I mean about all these layers. You have so many layers. So if there's a problem within a department, you now have to send people into 3 different areas to figure out where the problem is and where the waste is and where this is. Understand the connections to it. So I think it's gotten too big. I'm not really sure.
Well, you have to look at the Ritz-Carlton has how many, it's almost a million. It's like 200,000, 500,000, some ridiculous number of a water bill. How did it get that far that nobody was auditing their account?
Exactly.
To get to 6 figures for a water bill for a hotel condo complex that's right there sitting across the street from City Hall, pretty much.
Exactly. And it's like, who communicates? Because they got permits to build that building.
Right.
They know when it opens. So is there a connection to say permits here? We know this building is open certain time. So there should be water bills. There should be you know what I mean? Like something that there's some connectivity. So I'm not really sure, the full details on what Nick's plans are for this department, or if it's supposed to be like a whole little consulting group versus paying an outside company. But I would love to see what's the strategic plan, what's from a
Why don't you give him a call? You should give him a call and have a conversation with him. No, I'm not kidding with you. This is very serious. And
Yeah.
I think that what we as citizens have to really start doing is holding our politicians accountable. But also, we should be able to have a conversation with you if we have a better idea of what could work based on the intel and the experience that we've had.
I
And
agree.
too often we sit back and we have these conversations with ourselves, but we don't have them with the actual politicians and hold them to the respect of who we are and the information that we can give to them.
Exactly. So, Donnie, back to your original question, why I will never run for mayor.
Excuse me, that's it.
The reason being is I know my lane. I know my lane. And what I mean is, you have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be doing. God is still working on me for patience. And I don't have it right now in order to deal with people. But I'm always willing. One thing I will say is I like to see things fixed. So for anybody that's running, anybody that's in office that really, when I say running for the people, not running for themselves, running for people, and has a heart that wants to make a true impact, I'm willing to share my information, my resources, my knowledge in order to move the city forward. But it's not my lane to be the mayor.
I got one last question for me. Can you share with us about your business group of friends?
Sure. So what Donnie is referring to is that, when my husband was running for office, we had a group of women that got together, different business women throughout the city, artists, um, realtors, developers, different type of businesses that these women are, pushing forward, doing great things, doing things from an entrepreneurship level. We connect and engage periodically. I try to support people's businesses. So he's looking to do more things with those women because, women are, the I will say women are drivers, particularly women. Like, if you want to do something, like somebody might tell us, oh, no, you can't do that. We'd be like, we'll figure out another way. Like, you won't tell us, we won't do it. So he's looking to do more with those women. I think really more from their energy, like the energy of how do we spread that motivation to other people, no matter the age. It could be down to young women, to older women. Like, everybody has a talent, everybody has a skill. How do we push that forward so that that energy goes forward? And I find in general, even in healthcare, this is something we do. We use the women to get the men to do things. Like, we have these great husbands that are sitting home that have skills and talents. So if we can, use these women and the motivation and the energy to move forward, everybody just collectively move that energy forward, we can get some things going.
All right. Angela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We can't hear you, Donnie. What'd you say? You're mute.
You're muted.
I'm starting a draft Angela Sims for mayor campaign.
No, I will move.
Where?
I will move out of Baltimore to hide from you all.
No, you're stuck now.
Is there a city more palatable to Black people?
Donnie, see, you trying to start a whole nother conversation. Let's save that for another day.
Okay. Fine.
He's stirring the pot.
Exactly.
I was polite today. Marcia, just go ahead and plug Baya.
Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference, February the 11th through the 13th. You can go to beya.org to register. And I'm telling you, I've been involved with this organization since the mid-90s, and this is the place where STEM and Black people converge, and it is absolutely wonderful. BEYA.org, the Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference. Angie,
how can people stay in touch with you?
I don't know, Donnie. I stay off the radar. How they can stay in touch with me? I'm gonna tell you how you can stay in touch with me. We have a nonprofit organization. It's called the Greater Baltimore Health Improvement Association. We are looking to do more. What we focus on is primarily, closing the health life expectancy gap, but through those non-healthcare things, meaning education, engagement, advocacy, etc. So we're looking to do more and more in the years to come. So if you go to www.gbhii.org, send a message in there, sign up to volunteer. You can stay in touch with me because I'm gonna get you to work.
Great.
Good deal. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Up to date, down tomorrow. Do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it. I got to do it regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Good morning.
Good morning, Baltimore.
Good morning.